Good. And we are also recording the meeting.
Excellent.
All right, we are good to go. All right, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us on April 1st. No April Fool's jokes today. Hopefully you got them out of your system earlier in the day, and I don't think anyone was in the mood for any jokes this year anyway. So first, thank you for everyone who sent in questions to be asked tonight. And I received questions a variety of ways, most through the DTC email, but some were sent in phone messages and some were sent by text, and I appreciate all of them. And I condensed and combined, and in some cases, if you had multi-part questions, they might have ended up in different questions on here, but I hope that each of you see the questions that you sent in reflected in the questions, in different parts of the questions that we are asking tonight. So thank you for that. And I really want to thank the three candidates, Peter Sear, Lauren Garrett, and Brad Macdowall, for participating in this first ever process that we are doing here with the DTC. Thank you for completing those rather lengthy questionnaires. You guys actually, you're the beta testers for that. Perhaps you should shorten those up next time a little bit. But I do appreciate the obviously hard work that each of you put into those questionnaires. So a little bit about the format tonight. There will be a total of 9 questions. Why 9? Because it's seems like a right number that's divisible by 3. And we have 3 candidates, and we want to make sure that each candidate has an equal chance to go first, second, or third for answering questions. We're going to go in alphabetical order by last name in answering questions. So the first question will start with Peter, and then to Lauren, and then to Brad. And then we're just going to keep on going through that. So next would be Lauren, then Brad, then Peter, then Brad, then Peter, then Lauren, and so forth down through the list. There will only be one candidate in the room at a time answering each question, and the other 2 will be in the waiting room. Art will pop you into the waiting room and pop you back out when it is your time. We are having just for purposes, not to cut off any discussion, but just for purposes of trying to get through the questions with 3 candidates, we're asking to limit your answers to around 2 minutes. But if you need more time, that is fine. Art has a gong, or not to be confused with the Gong Show, but a gong or a chime. Art, can we hear that? So he will sound that at the 2-minute mark. And if you need more time after that, then at the 2-minute and 30-second mark, you will hear it again. And then if you are still speaking 10 seconds after that, then Art will ask you to wrap things up. And I don't intend to cut anybody off though, but this is just to keep things flowing, keep things moving along, right? The first couple of questions were specifically designed to act as sort of your opening. I'm sure there's going to be some repetition on the questions, it's just the way it is, but sort of introducing yourself and explaining why you're running would be the gist of the first couple of questions. And we'll have an extra minute in the last question. We'll probably not do the gong at all in the last question. So you have a chance to answer the question and also, say any closing remarks you might want to add at the end. All right. So any questions before we get to it?
Sean, Jody, close.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So thank you. And I'm going to ask that, I believe everyone is muted, ask that during this you remain muted so we can keep the focus where it belongs tonight on hearing from our candidates. So Art, can you place Lauren and Brad in the waiting room?
Lauren and Brad are in the waiting room. Wait, where's Brad? Brad didn't get to the waiting room. Okay.
Very good. All right, Peter. Here's a real tough one. Why are you running for mayor and what is your plan to win?
Thank you for the question, Sean. And thank you guys for having me. My name is Peter Sear. I come before you today looking for the Democratic endorsement for mayor. I come to this race as an outsider to Hamden politics, but as someone who was born and raised in Hamden and as someone who has worked for democratic values my entire life. I graduated from Hamden High in 2012. I have 3 older siblings who also graduated from Hamden High. I grew up on Whitney Avenue, right next to Best Video, and now I live behind the high school. The way I see it, Hamden is at an inflection point. We can continue to be defined by debt and failed leadership, or we can push that reset button and start fresh. I offer you that reset button. I come to the table with clear eyes about what Hamden needs and the challenges we are facing. And I want to get rid of the toxicity that has been clouding our decision making. As mayor, I will facilitate town growth through accountability, community outreach, and data-driven solutions. With recent growth and incoming federal and state dollars, we can offer a new vision for our town. This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity that we cannot waste. We need leadership that can properly steward in these dollars rather than just use them to cover up past misallocations. Your tax rates have doubled under compounding interest rates with no solution, explanation, or growth to back these increases. With no change in the guard, only in our mill rate, where is the accountability? I don't think I have all the answers, but in my professional experience, I've learned how to form coalitions, bring together stakeholders, and take a data-driven approach to solving big problems. We need to organize our way to solutions, and I would be proud to lead that effort in my hometown. So I look forward to taking more of your questions, and this is going to be fun. I'm excited. So that's why I'm running, and that's what I think I could bring to this race.
Great. Thank you, Peter. Art, can you do the honors of
Thank you, Peter.
sending Peter to the waiting room and bringing in Lauren?
Done.
All right, Lauren, here's the question for you. First question, why are you running for mayor and what is your plan to win?
Okay, well, I worked really hard in 2019 to meet the people of Hamden and explain our financial situation. I've continued those conversations and the messaging is getting through. They see it in their property tax bills or the escrow for their mortgage. They're demanding honesty and integrity in our budgets. People are understanding that we are carrying too much debt. We are #1 in debt per capita in the entire state. They see the lack of infrastructure in our crumbling roads throughout town. I'm invigorated to run again, to build on these relationships that I've developed and the work of my previous campaign because more people understand now. I continued to work during the off season and played a key role in organizing for this DTC and then developing a platform so that our shared values, we can carry those into the mayor's office. I'm fiscally responsible and compassionate, and I'm a trained engineer. I have a degree in naval architecture and marine engineering, which means that I can design a ship that floats, is stable, it maintains direction, and it can move. All these things have to come together all at once. So I'll bring this multitasking to the town. I will fix the mistakes of the past. I will plan for our future and manage the town as it exists today. So it's really time to put a nerd at the helm of Hamden. My plan to win, meeting the voters where they are. talking about my vision for Hamden that I hope we get into tonight, and raising funds to get our message out. And I've already begun to do some of that. I'll organize and lead a slate of endorsed candidates to cover the 33 square miles of Hamden so that we are out there as a team promoting one another. Josh Elliott asks people thinking about running if they are willing to run twice, because it often takes a couple of efforts to actually win. And I already have a race behind my belt or under my belt, and I have learned some lessons.
Thank you, Lauren. Your time is up.
Oh, I did not hear a gong.
Sean,
No, I didn't hear it.
I'm finished, but just
You know, I didn't hear
for
that.
future reference.
oh, Sean,
There it is. I hear
I
that.
can hear it now.
sorry.
Right. Very good.
You can
All right.
bounce me.
Let's bounce Lauren out of here and bounce Brad in.
There we are. I still have to.
Oh, so
No.
remember how there was a problem where somebody was bounced from a meeting and then they had to come back? Is that going to be a problem again?
No, I don't think so. That's different. That's
Okay.
if you're like kicked out of the meeting.
All right, finally.
Oh,
Thanks.
and Brad is in.
Brad
Yeah.
is in.
All right. Brad, here's your first question. Why are you running for mayor and what is your plan to win?
I graduated Hamden High School in 2011. I stayed in town, went to Quinnipiac University for undergraduate studies. And not only did I stay in town and live in town and commute to Quinnipiac, but I was involved in government, in politics, not only in Hamden, but in Connecticut, in New York. I served as a risk analyst for the town of Hamden for about a year. I served in the mayor's office under this current administration during their first summer. Took that experience, I brought it to the state capitol. I served as a legislative sessional in Hartford and an intern prior to that during college. In my time serving the community that I had grown up in, I realized that students in particular were not receiving the opportunities that had given me the opportunity to be so successful. And not only were students not receiving those opportunities, but you also had a gap, an achievement gap that already existed, right? Between different schools, different communities, different people that had already built themselves by the time that students were in the same building in Hamden Middle School and Hamden High School. Now, I didn't go to Hamden Middle School. I went to a arts magnet school in New Haven. But when I came back to Hamden for high school, it was critically clear those disparities and how they played out. I'm glad to see that the Board of Education has decided to make some of those classes more equitable and to integrate some of them. But we have a lot of work to do. And beyond students and beyond education, all of our residents are being asked to pitch in more with less, right? Because even those that continue to be employed, their wages have not kept up with inflation, and they certainly haven't kept up with taxes. And so we have a long way to go. I believe that I have the management experience managing hundreds of people across dozens of organizations at a time. That's what we need in a mayor. We are witnessing right now the failure to manage several departments and several projects at a time. I have experience building organizations and being able to manage those projects and to deliver results. In terms of winning, sorry, was that the bell?
It was.
Okay, it was a little soft. I want to make sure I'm on time.
I'm going to have to make sure that it's louder, but your time is up, Brad.
I do want to just say in terms of winning, right? If I can have that extra few seconds, you all have seen the organizations that I built. You've seen the campaigns that I can build. You've seen what we can do. You've seen how we can interact with the community, right? We're not talking about a dozen people knocking doors a few times a week. We're talking about a few dozen people every day. We're talking about hundreds of doors a day. This is the
Brad.
kind of community organizing we can deliver. Thank you.
Yep. Thank
Right,
you.
Thanks, Brad. And we're going to bring out Lauren for the next question.
Okay.
All right, she's out.
I'm here.
Before we start,
There you go.
Lauren,
Here,
can you hear?
clear.
Can you hear that?
I can hear that.
Good. Okay.
All right, here's your second question. As mayor, how would you promote equity and inclusion?
Okay. Well, I love that my children went through the Hamden Early Learning Program at Alice Peck School. They were in a diverse learning environment, and they're continuing that journey throughout our Hamden Public Schools. But I was disappointed to see that Hamden's diversity is not reflected in the staff in our schools or the municipal employees. In 2019, I held a panel discussion on educational justice with topics about recruiting and retaining Black and Brown teachers, culturally responsive curriculum, and discipline without bias. I have served on the Hamden Diversity Advisory Council, and I hope that this team will continue the HDAC work and carry out their mission. Our Public Works Department doesn't have a single Black person employed. Our fire department lacks diversity and just hired 12 white men. Our police department has increased its diversity hiring, but it needs to promote Black, Brown, and women, Black people, Brown people, and women officers. As mayor, I'll ensure that our diverse population is reflected in our municipal workforce. The Black and Brown people who live in our community, they keep our community safe and protected and clean. And these are good paying jobs that really need to go into our community. Commissions will be representative of our community and help to address equitable solutions. I'll provide clear, honest, accessible communication and solicit responses to make sure that everyone's voice is heard. I'll make sure to provide more affordable housing opportunities so that we can desegregate our neighborhoods. And I'll promote assistance programs like the Community Development Block Grant. It provides funding and opportunities for childcare, housing assistance, food insecurity, fuel assistance. Now, last year in fiscal year 20, the grant was for about $480,000, and the town only spent $320,000. And we haven't spent the full amount in years. We can and we should be doing more to provide for people.
Right. Thank you. And Art, for the record, I heard that final chime a little bit, but it's still very quiet. I'm not sure.
So I think what's happening is Zoom only lets one speaker, the voice of one speaker, be heard. And I think that because the presenter is speaking, it's not picking up the tone.
All right.
So it may be that I actually have to announce it. Because I think that for some reason, I think the announcing actually comes through better than the tone does. Because I really.
I think you're right. I think that's exactly what's going on. All right. So we'll just let the other two one at a time know that that's what we'll be doing. All right. So
put up a five-minute sign or something and let them know that they got, a couple of minutes, 30 seconds. I don't know.
yeah, a sign could work potentially.
I think they'd have to pay attention to it.
But they'd have to be paying attention. I think,
But yeah,
I think good to say something.
yeah. All right. Lauren,
all right,
we'll go
so-
back to the waiting room.
So next out is Brad.
Brad.
All right. Brad, so we encountered a little issue with the gong because I guess the Zoom is doing a really good job of filtering out noises that aren't coming from the current speaker. So it seems like that's what's going on. So Art, going forward, will just verbally say 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 30 seconds, and then, and then he'll give a final
Right.
lap to finish
Yeah.
up after that.
Right.
Unfortunately, that's what we have to do.
Right. I'm just going to say 2, time, and you'll have 10 seconds after the time to just wrap things up.
Okay, cool.
But
All right.
Yeah.
So now, the second question, Brad, as mayor, how would you promote equity and inclusion?
Right. So this is critically important, right? When we talked about this a lot in terms of elected officials, many of us talked about this when we ran for DTC, wanting a DTC that looks more representative of the community that we live in. And when we do that, I think we often talk, we often hear, and this happened a lot when the Board of Ed was talking about educators, right? And I think we often hear about the pool, right? The pool of talent. And I think that that is an incredibly problematic way to talk about the problem, because I think we need to ask ourselves as the individuals who are going to grow into leadership positions, whether or not we have cultivated places that are safe and accessible to everyone in town. I would say overwhelmingly that we have not. There need to be clear goals and deadlines in terms of making our civil servant, our team of civil servants look more like the community that they represent, and not just at a base level. We've seen the police department hire a little bit more diversity in terms of patrol officers. We have not seen that permeate in terms of leadership, and that goes across the town. I think that, if I'm not mistaken, our finance director is the second finance director of color that the town has ever had. Our legislative council celebrated diversity when we had 3 Black elected officials on the legislative council at the start of this term. And so we need to really think about and reshape our ideas in terms of what is success in terms of diversity and inclusion and equity. I think we also need to ask ourselves why it has been so difficult to ask that our civil servants are people that have bought into our community. We see a lot of civil servants from Milford, North Haven, other municipalities. I would like to see us prioritize individuals who live in town, who are from our communities, who know our communities, and have clear benchmarks and clear goals in terms of what we are looking for in terms of representation in our elected, or sorry, in our hired teams. I mentioned this in my questionnaire. I do believe that we need to seriously consider a director of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I do think that's something we need to do so that not only the mayor that we're looking at now, but future mayors can be held accountable to those goals. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And next out is Peter.
they keep jumping around where they place Brad in the list of.
Oh,
There we go. Where did you go? Okay, Peter, just joining now.
I'm back.
all right. So Peter, going forward, unfortunately, Art will have to verbally say it. It seems that Zoom is doing a very good job of filtering out extra noises, but human does
okay.
seem to get through.
That's okay.
So, all right. So here's your next question. As mayor, how would you promote equity and inclusion?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think one of Hamden's greatest assets is its diversity. And just being frank, I'm a white kid, so I think I have to do a good job of listening, being present, and realizing that my perspective might not be the best on this issue. So I need to be welcoming to other points of view. I think we've done a good job of starting this process with the declaration of racism as a public health crisis. but I think we need to make sure that that declaration has teeth. So what does that mean to me? That means being present in Southern Hamden. That means funding studies to show discrepancies in housing, to show discrepancies in education funding, and show discrepancies in health. We look at childhood asthma rates. They're way higher in minority neighborhoods, and that's true of Hamden too. I think we need to mend the digital divide. We need to make sure that kids have the resources when they're coming back into school from COVID, that they have everything they need to connect, and that we're not leaving those kids behind. And the last point I'll make on this, I think teams are better when they are diverse. I don't think that you can be a good team without having diverse points of view. You need to welcome everybody in, and you need to give them the space to talk and share their points of view, because that is ultimately how you come to the best decisions. Like I said, I'm a white kid. I don't have the best perspective on this. And then just one more point, I think we need to make an honest effort in hiring. We need to have a government that looks like our high school. We need to have a government and teachers that look like our high school, so that kids can look up to these people and say, hey, I can do that too. And yeah, so again, diversity is an asset in Hamden, and we need to promote inclusion. And I think that as mayor, I'm going to take steps to that. And that's going to be something that's going to start with listening, and then it's going to start with funding, and then
2 minutes, Peter. Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
You can go on for 30 more seconds.
Keep going on if you
No,
want.
that's okay. I'm good. I'll
All
stop
right.
there.
Thank you. So next out is Brad.
Okay.
All right. Brad, your next question. What is your vision for Hamden, and how might American Recovery Funds help get us there?
Sorry, my audio wasn't exactly intact there. Would you mind helping me?
Yep. What is your vision for Hamden, and how might American Recovery Funds help get us there?
Sure. Vision for Hamden is broad, right? I outlined a lot of this in the questionnaire, but we need to think critically about how we dig ourselves out of this financial hole, right? Residents can no longer continue to put away more each month for their taxes than their mortgage. And so we need to think about what is sustainable financially as a community. We need to think critically about that. We need to think critically about economic development and what kind of development we need to do to make Hamden a competitive place in the region where folks want to invest, where businesses and individuals want to invest. And we've seen a hot housing market, and that's great, but we need to build off of that, right? The housing market that we've seen for the last year, we need to take that as an opportunity to build off of that. And what kind of businesses do we want to see invest in Hamden? I think the funding that we're getting from the federal government, and we'll see how the state determines how they're going to allocate that. Because remember, right, the state didn't give us as much of a percentage as they were supposed to, or as was recommended by the federal government in the first round of municipal stimulus. So we'll see what we actually end up getting. But to utilize those funds as a way to do a combination of things, right? Investment in our community, development, marketing to make us competitive in the region, to show that we are somebody who can be competitive in the region in terms of economic development and growth. And also, I think it is critical to think about paying down our debt and our other liabilities, right? Certainly it doesn't make sense to take all of it and pay down our liabilities, but we have to remember that we have a massive amount of ballooning debt over the next few years, right? And if we think our debt service is high now, I don't know how many of you have looked through the budget, our debt service has been growing for a number of years. That continues to balloon for a few more years. And we hear the administration talking a lot about debt restructuring. All that does is compound our debt. So we're paying compounding debt. And often, because we can talk about
2 minutes.
often because we're talking about capital sweeps, we're paying compounding debt time and time again on operating expenses. So we have to critically think about how we straighten out those fiscal practices and then utilize that money both for investment, capital investment, and also paying down our liabilities to make sure that residents are not brunting that cost. I have a lot more to say on the matter. I know my time is up. I hope we'll be able to revisit this.
Thanks, Brad.
Thanks, Brad. And next out is Peter.
Okay.
All right, Peter, next question. What is your vision for Hamden and how might American Recovery Funds help get us there?
Yeah, so I think about this question and I think about Hamden as a middle-class community. We need to make Hamden work because we need to make a thriving middle-class community. We've seen that erode in America. And I think we're seeing that pain and those structural problems come down on Hamden a lot. So, I mean, the first step to that is the budget. I look at the American Recovery Plan as a chance for a reset. But I think we need strict accountability when it comes to those dollars, right? I don't want to see us misbudgeting and sort of misplanning so that we're covering our deficit with the 10 million that's coming in that we could use for what we want, right? I think we need to invest this money and grow our way out of debt. So I'm hyper focused on accountability when it comes to those dollars. How are we making investments? How are we not covering up past misallocations, right? Because we still have a structural deficit, right? And this is no doing of anyone but the federal government throwing us funds, right? So that is key to addressing that problem. And the American Recovery Fund help us get closer to that. So I view Hamden as the middle-class backbone of this state. We need to make it work. And that first starts by fixing our budget. If we could fix our budget, we could do fun things. We could find solutions to some of our cultural problems, right? But it all starts with a budget, and we need to make that work because Hamden is the middle-class backbone of this state.
Right.
Peter,
Thank
do you want to say anything else before you go back into the waiting room?
No, I'm all good.
Good.
Thanks.
Next up is Lauren. All right, Lauren, your next question. What is your vision for Hamden and how might American Recovery Funds help get us there?
Well, Hamden is a beautiful town with wonderful people. Our students deserve a quality education where they see themselves reflected in the educators and the curriculum. We can improve our schools with universal pre-K so students can reach their full potential. Environmental standards are good for our health, good for our budget. We can combat the climate crisis right here in Hamden. I'll increase fuel efficiency in our town fleet and modernize buildings to reduce our carbon footprint. I will collaborate with commissions, the Legislative Council, and neighborhood associations so that we all have a voice in Hamden. We will build trust in the community with transparency and accountability throughout our town and by making the town website an open source for data. The legacy we pass down to future generations shouldn't be a burden of debt. I will enforce a financial plan that stabilizes our debt and mill rate, access to transportation, services at the Key Community Center, workforce training, and 21st century economic development will keep families in Hamden and provide upward mobility. A complete streets design with trees and walkable shopping will help to make Hamden a place where businesses want to relocate to. I'll responsibly manage the budget with collaboration from stakeholders at the table for union contracts and town contracts. We need economic development that grows our grand list and improves quality of life. We'll keep Hamden clean by developing a town maintenance schedule for street sweeping and brush cleanup, so that we can put this on the website and see street by street where work's being done and who's up next. I'll create a crisis intervention team comprised of social workers to address issues related to homelessness, addiction, and nonviolent conflict.
2 minutes.
Thank you.
30
So
seconds. Go ahead.
the American Recovery Funds should pay for a lot of this: revitalization of Southern Hamden, partnering with social workers, improvements to the Keith Community Center, housing opportunities. But unfortunately, the current administration has suggested using the American Recovery Funds to restore the fund balance and fix mistakes and mismanagement really of the past. This is not what was intended. The $11 million should really help those who have suffered the most. But this is our chance to build back better, like Biden says.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next up is Peter.
Oh, come on. Help me out here. There we go. Okay. Peter.
All right, Peter, next question. How will you deal with our budget and our union workforce? And do you have any relevant experience that will prepare you for this challenge?
Yep. So in terms of relevant experience, I've made a statewide budget for Senator Murphy's campaign. That's what I've been doing for the past 2 years. So I've done 2 yearly budgets for him. So I do have experience in budgeting. I think all options are on the table. You know, if we're facing $1 billion of debt, I think we need to be serious about our options, right? I think our budget starts with communication. What are the structural problems? Why are our taxes going up? That's a really important piece to this, because that's a root a lot of the frustration. We need to effectively communicate some of the problems we're seeing, and we need to be open and honest about that. Then I want to run efficiency reports on every department. You know, if we have a new administration, that gives us the ability to sort of bring some new things up to speed. Maybe we can optimize. I don't want to cut services, but I want to optimize efficiency, right? So can we get more for less, and how can we do that? And then I think being a proper steward of the American Rescue dollars is really important. Not using that to pay off past debts, using that to invest in growth is very important to me. And the next thing I want to do is make real projections for our growth. You know, last budget cycle, the mayor projected an 8.1% increase in our growth, and we only realized 7.4%. That's a huge increase, 7.4%, but we still did not reach his 8.1 number. So we're technically still underperforming, right? I want to put a 4% growth target every year. I think that's realistic. I think that's achievable. And then I want to be serious about our structural problems. I don't think we're going to tax and cut our way out of this. We need to be honest with our budgeting so we can make an argument to the state. I'm a believer in Keynesian economics. I think we need to dump cash in this situation. We need to work with our stakeholders, and we need to make an argument to the state, because ultimately Hamden is a high minority community, like other communities around us, and we get underfunded, and it's a civil rights issue, right? And if we're not honest in our budgeting, we can't go to the state and give honest solutions, right? So that's sort of my plan. I think we have a lot that we need to deal with and a lot we need to focus on, but ultimately we need to dump cash in this situation. We're not going to tax and cut our way out of it.
Thanks, Peter. All right, next up is Lauren. All right, Lauren, next question. How will you deal with our budget and our union workforce? And do you have any relevant experience that will prepare you for this challenge?
Okay. Well, I'll start with the goals for our future, like I talked about previously, and develop a 5-year plan, which needs to include projections for our revenues and expenses, as well as what's needed in achieving our goals. I'll develop a capital plan with priority rankings to address infrastructure, on an as needed basis. I'll implement cost reduction through efficiency and right sizing departments. Sometimes though, that'll mean more hiring. In New Haven, they hired a grant writer at $90,000 a year who brought in $2 million in grants. I'll use all of this to create an honest budget with projections for expenses, revenues based on 3-year actuals. I will not make risky assumptions with taxpayer dollars. I have a strong relationship with our state delegation, and I'll have a presence in Hartford to advocate for more funding for Hamden, so there's less reliance on property taxes in our budget. I'll evaluate town contracts like the ice rink to make sure that Hamden's getting a good deal. I'll make transparency a priority so that taxpayers trust us with their money. With the unions, I'll negotiate union contracts for cost savings while respecting the unions. Frequently, unions are asked to give back while connected appointed employees are given large salary increases. While I was on the council, at the very same meeting, there were votes to confirm mayoral appointments with salary increases and votes to approve union concessions. The unions will be more willing to come to the table when they're respected. And lately, the union concessions have come with short-term savings and long-term costs that we just can't afford. My experience, I am a successful business owner.
2 minutes.
And thanks. And I'm responsible for the finances, including bookkeeping, budgeting, profit and loss statements, tax preparation, and business strategy. Being a parent, you know what it's like to be responsible for another human being. And as mayor, I'd be responsible for an additional 62,000 people. And I don't take that responsibility lightly. I've served on Hamden's Legislative Council as the chair of education and personally focused on transparency and accountability.
Thanks, Lauren. And next is Brad.
Done.
All right, Brad, next question. How will you deal with our budget and our union workforce? And do you have any relevant experience that will prepare you for this challenge?
Sure. So, I mean, first I'll focus on the town has to stop negotiating in bad faith, right? We constantly negotiate these contractual bargaining agreements with the anticipation that we're going to come back for concessions. And we've heard that time and time again. Oh, that's okay. Just vote on it. We're gonna get concessions anyway. And then that does one of two things, right? It is negotiating in bad faith, right? We're supposed to be negotiating a contract that we are going to agree and abide by and respect our laborers and the labor that they give the town, right? And the other thing it does is it sets unrealistic expectations for the budget. So we anticipate concessions and we see the mayor projecting revenues that we just don't realize through concessions that we don't end up getting. And so that's been problematic as well. I'll also say that, you know, the administration and some other leadership has lacked reverence or respect for, like I said in the, you know, previously, our laborers and the labor that they put in for the town. These are individuals who have dedicated their career to service of the town. And we are going to rely on these individuals to help dig us out of the current crisis that we are in, to continue to provide necessary, important services that residents are going to expect if we're asking them to put in a mill rate over 50. If we're expecting people to stick out this mess. So I think we have to figure that out and start respecting labor and negotiating in good faith. At the same time, not all unions have been created or treated equally. And so in particular, public safety unions have received much of what they've asked for fear of elected officials looking like they are anti-public safety. And I think it is the role of elected officials, both on the council and for the town, to negotiate on behalf of the town.
2
And
minutes.
Thank you. While we must respect labor, we also need to negotiate on behalf of the town. The COLA was out of control, and we are working on getting that under control. We have yet to even see the consideration of a bad boys clause considered for public safety, right? These are the kinds of things that are common sense and have been commonplace in other places. And yet Hamden officials have sort of been shy about demanding them. And so these are the kinds of things that we need to think about. We need to end the practice and the expectation that certain collective bargaining units are going to be able to come to the table several times for negotiation before others come even once. Thank you.
That's it. Thank you, Brad.
All right, thanks, Brad. And Lauren is up next.
Okay.
All right, Lauren, your next question. How will you bring much needed economic development to Hamden?
We need to recruit an effective economic development director who will increase the grand list through reimagining spaces for today's needs. This means walkable shopping, a grocery store in Southern Hamden, investment in infrastructure in Northern Hamden, which really means sewers north of Mount Carmel on Whitney Avenue to help businesses like restaurants and medical offices. And we need to work with QU to create a college town feel along Whitney Avenue. Our partnership there is mutually beneficial. We've experienced the need for fiber internet during the pandemic, and that will help attract businesses and help people who have home businesses. Improvements to our roads, catch basins, streetscapes in Southern Hamden to help keep our roads clean and attractive. I'll establish an aggressive outreach effort to attract new businesses to Hamden and develop a visitor's guide for our great eateries and breweries combined with our natural attractions like Sleeping Giant, the Farmington Canal, Lake Wintergreen. We'll highlight Black-owned, woman-owned, LGBTQ-owned, minority-owned businesses and other cultural hotspots. We have a wealth of artists and musicians and performers and chefs that can help us to showcase Hamden and its rich culture. I'll encourage workforce development, both in our schools and in the community, to ensure that the people of Hamden have the skills and access to job opportunities. And I'll make it easier to start a business. So businesses will have a town official designated to help them through the process. I'll make sure that building permits and planning and zoning permits are easier to get by providing resources to those departments so they can do their job efficiently. And I'll start a business program that provides resources and education. I'm sorry?
You get 30 more seconds.
Oh, okay. So I'll provide a business program that helps provide resources and education to ensure new businesses so that new business owners are successful.
All right, thank you, Lauren. And next up is Brad.
Should be set. Brad,
All right.
if it's okay with you, instead of saying 2 minutes, I think I'm going to just start saying 30 seconds so you know how much time you have left.
That works.
Good. We're going to get this formula down before we're done.
Oh, you said it. We are the pilot program, right?
Yeah, that's right. All right.
We appreciate it.
Question. How will you bring much needed economic development to Hamden?
So we need to start thinking about Hamden not as one approach, but as the holistic and diverse approach that we have for each of our communities, right? We cannot think about economic development the same way in say Spring Glen or Whitneyville as we would in New Hallville or Hamden Plains. We cannot continue to do that. So having one economic development approach is just not going to work as we think about how we're going to make ourselves competitive in the region. So, you know, I think we need to think about investment in infrastructure townwide. We have places all over town where our infrastructure is either crumbling or it's 30 years behind schedule. I also think we need to think about infrastructure into the future, right? So not only the infrastructure that should have been in place 30 years ago, like the water systems on Whitney Avenue north of Route 40, right? But also what is going to make us competitive tomorrow, right? 5-10 years from now. After a lot of lobbying, I was able to successfully get things like fiber optics into our plan of conservation and development. And it wasn't just fiber optics, but I think that's one of the most exciting ones, right? Because if you look at booms that have occurred in other places like Tennessee, why are businesses investing so heavily in Tennessee? I mean, they can't, people are getting more job offers than they're handing out applications. It's because of infrastructure development like fiber optics that has made those locations competitive in the region, and we have an opportunity to be ahead of that curve here in Hamden. We need to work with all of our educational institutions, right? So I think we need to think critically about each individual neighborhood, who the partners are in those neighborhoods, and how we move forward. What kind of economic development, what kind of economic opportunity do the residents need? And I could talk for an hour on this because it's so complicated and because there's so many facets. But one of the last
30
things
seconds
that, you know, I think we need to be thinking critically about, sorry, that's where my train of thought off. I think we need to be thinking critically about how we, does the economic development that we do, does it produce economic opportunities for the residents in that community? We can think about vacancy all day. We can replace and have revolving doors in different locations all day. And each of us in our communities have places that have just been this revolving door of businesses that come in and then fail and are replaced and fail. We constantly think about vacancy. We got to fill that vacancy, right?
time.
If that vacancy doesn't bring economic opportunity to that community long term, we need to think more critically about that. I'm sorry, there's 2 minutes is so fast.
I know it is.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Brad. Next up is Peter.
Should be all set.
All right, Peter, next question. How will you bring much needed economic development to Hamden?
This question is really important. I think a couple of years back, we all knew that article where Hamden was one of the best places to start a small business. I don't think that's the case anymore. We have one of the highest mill rates in the state, and we have one of the highest commercial mill rates in the state. So it starts there, getting on a realistic plan to bring down some of those costs on businesses. And then another thing is, it's not really affordable for young people to live in Hamden anymore. We all talk about wanting our kids to come back, but we need to give them a space to come back. I think that starts with housing. Something we could do immediately is, like, we could do this tomorrow, is work with the planning and zoning board and allow for accessory dwelling units. This is not big development. You could turn your garage into an Airbnb. You could do things like that. It could generate extra income from someone. So that will make our housing market more competitive, and then also grow our grand list so that we could work on some tax decreases. Another thing about investment is we need a stable political environment. We can't have bickering. We can't have indecisiveness. We can't have town council meetings going till 2 a.m, right? Like, we need predictable tax bills so that we're not blowing through a business's bottom line at the end of the year. So I think about bringing down the temperature. I think about maybe working on some development that's easy and attainable. And then also just trying to make it more affordable for a young person to live here and giving them space to come back and grow. So those are just a couple of the reasons. I think we've come a long way since that article, and we need to work on getting ourselves back to Hamden being a good place to start small business. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Peter. And next up is Brad.
Okay.
All right, Brad, next question. How do you envision the future of policing and public safety in Hamden?
That's a complicated question for the reason that I think it's going to look very differently over the next 2 years than it can 10 years from now. I think there is a final goal that we need to achieve, and I think that there is clear goals that we can set in the next 2 years in terms of how to get here. First and foremost needs to be people don't feel served, they don't feel protected. And we have an obligation to address that first and foremost. We've all seen from body cam footage, dash cam footage, to footage on the side of a business, right, that was captured. We've seen that our practices, especially the triple occupation of New Hallville, have led to the harm, the generational harm of entire communities, and that it has impacted communities like New Hallville, and it hasn't impacted our white communities in that same way. And so I think we need to think critically about how we got here and where we go. We also need to do an in-depth analysis of what we have on the books and what we're enforcing and how we enforce it, right? We can go back to I know I've had this conversation with some of you. The one-ways that exist in New Hallville exist because of the race riots that happened decades ago. They exist not because those roads were meant to be safer as one-ways, but because we were preventing Black residents from driving through white neighborhoods. To continue enforcing those kinds of things, we need to be aware of where they came from and what the impact they have is continuing. We need vast demilitarization. We need to think about how we deal with problems like homelessness and addiction. Police are not meant to deal with those, right? And so we need to think critically about how we deal with those problems, because not only is policing not the right way to handle those problems,
30 seconds.
but police don't want to be handling those problems anyway. If you talk to a police officer in town, they know that they are not well equipped or trained to deal with problems like homelessness or addiction. They know that the work that they are doing is not helping the resident. They are not keeping the community safer. They're just mitigating and doing damage control. And it's creating larger, like I said, generational issues. So these are the kinds of things that we need to think critically about how we address these problems.
Time.
And 2 minutes is really quick. You all know, listen, what I will say, I've made it very clear and I've been very loud, both behind the council chambers and in the streets, about what I believe in and where we need to go.
Thanks, Brad.
So I think I've been clear about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Next up is Peter.
Okay.
All right, Peter, next question. How do you envision the future of policing and public safety in Hamden?
This is a really important question, and I think we deal with this on a municipal level. I frankly don't think we're training cops to do the job today that we're asking them to do, and it leads to really stressful, escalatory situations that don't pan out for anyone, right? And this is a long-term goal for me. I want to reimagine how we think about local government. I think we need to expand a social work component to local government. So the mayor, in his current budget, he proposed 6 new police officers as a crisis intervention unit. I actually think that's the wrong approach. I think we need to hire professional, trained social workers, not more cops. Hiring cops for the job will only lead to escalation, and we don't need that. We need to sort of take that away. I think we need long-term fixes for the long-term problems, like drug addiction, like homelessness, like mental health, right? I've heard cops say this to me. I have friends who are cops. They don't want to deal with those problems. They don't know how to. It's expensive to. So I really see us expanding local government and taking a load off of our police force and shifting it toward a more social local government, right? We need to find long-term cost savings here and make our police department more efficient. You know, they're there to protect property and police violent crime. They're not there to be social workers. So I really see the future of policing as taking some of the load off of their plate and sort of removing them from those situations so that we don't have these escalations and we don't have these instances where things get out of hand. Because if we send trained people without guns to situations that don't need guns, then they're not going to become as violent. So I think we need a social work role in our local government. And this is something I really care about. I think we could solve this issue in Hamden if we put our heads together and cooler heads prevail.
30 seconds.
Right? So we need to lead the way, because Hamden is a place that, you know, we're not a racist town. Like, we can find a solution here. And I really think Hamden is a perfect microcosm for America in terms of our population, in terms of our demographics. So if we could have an honest discussion here that doesn't get political, I think we could find a real solution to some of these long-term problems. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Peter. And next up is Lauren. All right, Lauren, next question. How do you envision the future of policing and public safety in Hamden?
Well, I've actually been doing a lot of research on policing, and there's a report that was actually just put out called Policing During the Pandemic. And they studied big cities, and big cities across the United States. They found that crime was up significantly, like 30%. But in Connecticut, it was actually down. And maybe this is because of the way that we distribute food on the municipal level, or because of Governor Lamont's executive orders around keeping people housed, or the police accountability bill. But at any rate, police don't prevent crime, they respond to crime. So when it comes to crime prevention and trauma-informed response to crime, that's what I'm really interested in. So early in the pandemic, buildings were closed. The basketball hoops were taken off of the net, or the backboard. Parks had restrictions placed on them. This took a sense of community away from many at-risk youth and adults. It's time to put the hoops back up and allow people to use our parks and make a plan for opening our buildings. Hamden budgets $60,000 a year for street worker outreach prevention program. This is the most valuable expense in the police department's budget, and this program needs to be expanded. A community member opened up a youth center right before the pandemic hit, and unfortunately had to close the doors pretty quickly. I would like the town to be a partner and provide social workers to help kids acclimate back into regular life when it's safe. I would also like to expand the youth center to include some engaging activities for workforce development.
30 seconds.
To help kids find a clear path after school, a career path after school. I'll develop a crisis intervention team with the funds from the American Recovery Act to respond to nonviolent incidents related to homelessness and addiction and nonviolent disputes. And we need to make sure that our officers are trained in trauma-informed practices. Children who experience trauma are more likely to become violent later in life. And we need to make sure that we have diversion.
All right, thank you, Lauren. And next up is Peter.
Okay.
All right, Peter, next question. How will you make Hamden a more pedestrian-friendly and environmentally sustainable community?
Yeah, so I think this is a great question. And I think a key component to moving forward in the future is, how do we get more cars off the road? I think it's frankly a little ridiculous that I live right behind the Hamden Plaza and I have to sort of drive all the way down. It's not really connected in the middle. There aren't really walkable places. And it kind of makes me mad. Like I consider myself an environmentalist, and I don't like the fact that I have to drive 2 minutes to get down a hill. So I want to repurpose the Clean and Green Committee. There are 5 vacancies on the Clean and Green Committee. I want to run a campaign that gets new people involved in politics and bring some energy there. I want them to organize meetings that improve our green spaces, work on getting grants to make things more walkable. And there's going to be a lot of money out there for these types of things, getting toward 100% renewable, developing green spaces. Biden said today that he's putting out $2 trillion as a down payment on these things, right? We need to explore that. We need to have Hamden be front and center in that conversation, competing for those funds. Because, frankly, in our budget, it's not going to be top priority of mine to make Hamden more walkable, because we have a lot of things facing us, right? But we can do it in creative ways, and we need to find ways to do it creatively, right? It's something I value, right? But we have a huge budget problem, just to be honest, right? So if we can find creative solutions and organize ideas, I would love to make Hamden a more walkable place.
All right, thank you, Peter. And next up is Lauren. All right, Lauren, next question. How will you make Hamden a more pedestrian-friendly and environmentally sustainable community?
Okay, well, I think I've touched on a few ideas to make Hamden more pedestrian-friendly through economic development. So, improving our streetscapes, walkable shopping. We need continued investment into our sidewalks and maintenance and trash removal that makes walking more enjoyable. The Plan of Conservation Development that was passed in 2019 provides a guide for complete streets. The idea is that the streets are designed for pedestrians and bicycles first, with cars prioritized last. It's beneficial for the community, the environment, and businesses. There are a few organizations that have really helpful resources and guides and ideas, like Strong Towns and Sustainable CT. And I think what we need to do is select a couple areas and do it in a segmented approach, so that we're doing a little bit at a time. And we can use American Recovery Funds and grants and tax incentive financing in this segmented approach. For environmental sustainability, that's something that's just always really been important to me personally. I have solar panels on my house. We use the solar electricity to heat our home and charge my electric car. We compost our kitchen scraps and recycle. We keep the leaves in the backyard all the way in the back to keep those good critters around for the lawn. We don't spray pesticides because they're bad for us, our animals and bees. And when the kids were in preschool, I'd go into the school and teach the kids about composting and healthy soils, and then we'd plant a tree. I'll take these values into the mayor's office, and you can trust that I'll take care of it because these are my values. I'll support a tree ordinance and work to expand transportation to reduce pollution. I'll make sure that we pass community choice aggregation so that we can reduce energy costs for Hamden residents and expand green energy. I'll increase miles per gallon for our town fleet and add electric vehicles, update town buildings. We'll work with the state to clean up sites with environmental pollution, like the Olin Powder Farm. And the DTC platform that I helped develop has a lot of really good examples of how we can make Hamden more environmentally sustainable.
Time.
All right, thank you, Lauren. Next up is Brad.
Okay.
All right, Brad, next question. How will you make Hamden a more pedestrian-friendly and environmentally sustainable community?
Sure. Pedestrian friendliness is something that we've not thought about holistically for a long time. We need to be tapping into the LoCIP grants at the state, and we need to be utilizing them for what they're meant for. We need to be thinking about infrastructure holistically. And if people can't walk in their own communities, you know, it creates larger problems, right? Not only environmental problems, like you mentioned, but it is a matter of whether someone can or cannot get to their job without taking an hour-long bus ride down 20 blocks, right? So a lot of impacts that we can think about transportation. And I do want to, hopefully at some point we talk about transportation too, because I think transportation is a large part of the environmental sustainability conversation. Pedestrian in particularly, we need to be doing the list that we have. We have a long list of projects that we need to either repair sidewalks or rebuild sidewalks, to repair paths or build paths. And we have neglected those for a long time. So we need to get on with that. I know 2 minutes is short, so I want to get on to environmental sustainability. We need to be thinking about how we transition Hamden to end its reliance on fossil fuels. And that is something that we can accomplish. Other communities in the Northeast have accomplished it, and Hamden can accomplish it too. It is not only the environmentally sustainable thing to do, but it is the smart business decision. It is what is going to make us a competitive community in the region. So to think about our grid and the way that we aggregate energy and deliver energy, not only for the town's purposes, but for residents. We need to be democratizing energy. Energy it has not been and can no longer be the practice. It has not been sustainable and can no longer be the practice that we continue to have energy be a for-profit business. And we need to be advocating that we at least have public options here in our region, and community choice aggregation, which was proposed by Councilman Farmer and myself, is a great start to that. But there's a lot other work to do. So there's a lot there. We also need to be thinking critically about, you know, like I said, just sorry, I love that 30 seconds, man. It loses the focus. Listen, I've been clear about, you know, whether it's Rocky Top or the Brooksvale, right? Brooksvale, by the way, the 50 acres that we added onto Brooksvale just closed today, and that we are working now with the state grant to bring that in, and to it will be managed by the Hamden Land Conservation Trust. These are partnerships that I've worked on, and will continue to use so that we can make more environmentally friendly decisions.
Brad.
Residents. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Brad. Next up is Lauren.
Okay.
All right, Lauren, next question for you. What is the mayor's role in ensuring a quality, equitable education in public schools?
So I'm a mom with 3 kids in our Hamden Public Schools, elementary school, middle school, high school, and I'm deeply invested in our educational outcomes. Equitable access to education is a critical component of dismantling systemic racism. I've been an advocate of redistricting through redrawing our district boundaries to bring racial balance to our schools. We need to give our students an early start with access to preschool, like the Hamden Early Learning Program that my children went through. I spoke earlier about the educational justice panel discussion earlier, and one of the topics was discipline without bias. We need to reconsider exclusionary discipline approaches that take the student out of the learning environment. I talked about culturally responsive curriculum, so students can see themselves reflected in the curriculum. I just read an article today about Elm City Montessori and their One Book initiative to teach anti-racism and exclusion in all their classrooms. We need to make sure that we include professional development and classroom materials for teachers as well. We need to recruit and retain Black and Brown teachers and create a student to teacher pipeline to increase the diversity of our educators. And I believe that social workers and school psychiatrists are going to be needed to help students recover from the stress and trauma of COVID, and really the stress and trauma that has always existed. I will follow the evidence when it comes to school safety. We need to end the school to prison pipeline and provide additional supports for students and families. And understand that one of our best resources is people like Matt Battle, who know every kid at Hamden High. I'll make sure that our students have a pathway for municipal jobs in Hamden and our public schools.
30 seconds.
So the State Department of Education has a district profile and performance report, and this should be made available on the Hamden Schools website because we will be proud of our outcomes and results.
All right, thank you, Lauren. And next up is Brad.
Okay.
All right, Brad, your next question. What is the mayor's role in ensuring a quality, equitable education in Hamden Public Schools?
Sure. A lot of folks on the legislative council, a lot of folks who've been in elected office for a number of years now in town will tell you that the legislative council and the mayor are very limited in terms of what they can do for the education because we have state policies in place that separate the Board of Education and their responsibilities. I do not believe that. At the end of the day, the legislative council and the mayor hold the purse strings, and that is the ultimate power, right? We can talk all day about budgets being moral documents, and we hold the purse strings and can utilize that to have meaningful conversations about where we need to go. And that's not only on curriculum, right? We've talked about recruitment and hiring and equity. And again, we talk a lot about recruitment and hiring, but we also need to talk about retaining talent as well. And beyond that, right, we can talk about how we keep our students safe. The SRO program has not worked and we need to end it. We need to think critically about how we keep our students safe and the impact that that has on different student populations. We need to think about partnering with local institutions, Quinnipiac, Yale, Southern, Albertus, and there are others that all have property in Hamden. And by the way, presidents of 3 of those institutions have come to speak before the Legislative Council and offered partnerships, and those have not been utilized. Those can be critical resources that our students, especially our students first in need, could be using at this time. And so, you know, there's a lot of different things we could be doing from an executive position to be able to have a say in how we educate our students, to make sure that that education is more equitable, and to make sure that the school that you go to and the community that you grow up in does not determine the quality of the education.
30 seconds.
So yeah, sorry, I got thrown off by that. I'll leave it at that. Again, I think this is something that I've been outspoken on. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
I thank you, Brad. Peter is up next.
All set.
All right, Peter, your next question. What is the mayor's role in ensuring a quality, equitable education in Hamden Public Schools?
The mayor's role is to lead the charge here. So that means being the messenger and communicating that we need to be diverse in our hiring. We need a budget that speaks our values, to making sure that resources are going to every part of town equally and equitably. We need to make sure that no kids are left behind from the digital divide here. As they come into school, we're going to have a lot of kids coming from tough home lives, and we need to be cognizant of that and get those kids those resources. So maybe that means putting more resources into those kids that are falling behind, but recognizing that and addressing that. And then finally, I think the mayor needs to lead the way on preparing kids for the new digital economy. Education is ultimately the way to equity, and we need to start that young. So I propose we start teaching our kids coding in elementary school. This is a language. The earlier you teach them, the better they're going to get at it. I think we need to de-emphasize college and emphasize trade more. I know a bunch of kids that went to Hamden High with me that work in advanced manufacturing. They didn't go to school, but they make 100, 120K a year. We need to be realistic about those are good jobs and good options. And so preparing our kids is the best way to ensure that there's equity and they're competitive in the global economy.
Thank you, Peter. And next up is Brad.
All set.
There he is. All right, Brad, this is the final question of the night. And as such, you could work in your closing statement here. So we will not interrupt you until the 3.5-minute mark.
Okay.
And then we'll just after 3.5 minutes, sorry, Art, I think I threw a wrench in it for you.
That's all right. I can.
At 3.5 minutes, then we will just ask you to begin wrapping up, but we're not going to do a hard close, finish your thought. All right. So
Sure.
Here is the question for you. And finally, to get ready for door knocking, how do you explain complex financial issues in layman's terms when talking to Hamden residents?
Layman's terms is we don't have to simplify things for residents. Residents are smart. They can understand, right? I like to compare it a lot to a mortgage, right? We're talking about homeowners, and we're talking about renters who know what it takes to manage a home or a family budget. When you talk about it in those terms and percentages, in terms of, well, what would happen to you if you were to swipe your credit card and then keep restructuring? Would someone let you do that? Those are important comparisons, but short of that, I think residents can understand it, right? And yeah, we all need snappy one-liners on our literature, right? But I think we can reason with residents, but we need to make sure we hit every door. We need to make sure that we have enough people that can hit every door. We need to make sure that we have a candidate who is going to and has already hit every door. And so I think that is something that we are going to be able to have those conversations and people understand the situation that we're in. I think folks have seen what I can do on a campaign, not only for other candidates, but for myself. You see the messaging that I put out. You see how effective it can be. You see how effective the conversations can be when we have them with community members, and how we build community. And not only the relationships we build with individual community members, but with communities at large, right? Whether we're talking about Spring Glen or Rocky Top or, New Hallville, the relationships that we build in these individual communities are so important and equally as important to the relationships that we build with individuals. I know that we're probably getting on time, so I want to wrap up by talking about the vision that we can put together for Hamden. We have an incredible opportunity. We have been given by the Democratic voters in Hamden the incredible opportunity to build a vision, to rebuild Hamden, to build a Hamden that is equitable, that is amazing and green, and a place where people want to invest and live and work and retire. The narrative that we put out and the language that we put out over the next few months is going to be so important. The communications that we have are going to be so important. We're looking for a team captain. As DTC members, you are and need to be involved in the solutions at a deep level. No one person is going to be able to dig us out of the hole that we are in, but we need a team captain who can deliver a win, who has shown that they can deliver a win, and who has shown that they can manage staff and projects and deliver results. And so I'll end on this. Most of you at one point or another have had conversations with me about problems in the community or problems that you were facing, whether it was concerns about the budget, a traffic problem, We need someone who has a bias towards action, a bias towards what can I do to deliver a result and when can I deliver that result by. I've always had a bias towards action. In fact, when I came on the legislative council, I was dismayed to find that there wasn't a process by which a legislative council member could legislate, could propose legislation. We built and wrote and codified that process by way of our plastic bag and plastic straw ban, right? In doing so, we also built
30 seconds.
We also built amazing relationships with the business community, not only individual business owners, but organizations like our Economic and Development Commission, like our Chamber of Commerce, which it was a while ago, so I don't know who remembers, but almost 80% of the Chamber of Commerce voted in favor of a plastic bag and plastic straw ban. I mean, that is unprecedented level of consensus building. And what we can do on that on a community level is amazing. And I'm looking forward to being able to build that with everyone. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Brad. And we'll put you back in the waiting room. And then after the other two go, oh, he's already gone. All right.
So Peter's next.
And Peter's next, that's right. All right, Peter, here's your last question, and you can build in at the end of it your kind of closing statement, and we will not interrupt you until the 3.5-minute mark, at which point Art will say 30 seconds. All right, so here's the question. And finally, to get you ready for door knocking, how do you explain complex financial issues in layman's terms when talking to Hamden residents?
Yeah. So I think about this in two ways. We have ballooning debt combined with dishonest budgeting. And this is sort of covering up a structural problem at the root of it. I think we have a structural problem of a broken property tax system that disproportionately affects Hamden. If you look at Greenwich, their mill rate is 11. That's a rich town. They're not a very diverse town. And then you look at Hamden, it's over 50. To me, that's a civil rights issue. That's wrong. And if you look at all the towns that have a disproportionate amount of untaxable property, they just happen to be the minority towns, right? So I really think I look at this as a structural problem, but this has been compounded over years and years of trying to cover up these sort of funding gaps, right? So we've seen we're using debt to pay more debt, and that compounds on our interest, right? So at the root of it, it's a structural issue. We need state help and we need state fixes, but our dishonest budgeting compounds that problem and has made it worse and worse over the year. So just to go to closing, this was a lot of fun. I like the structure. I look forward to developing these relationships and getting to know you guys. I appreciate the platform and robust discussions. I think these conversations are the first step in solving some of Hamden's surmounting challenges. We're not going to tax and cut our way out of $1 billion in liabilities. We need a serious look at a bigger solution. I'm a believer in Keynesian economics. I think we need an influx of cash to grow our way out of this situation. Hamden, along with other communities, are burdened by a property tax paradox where our grand list shrinks every time our non-taxable land grows. The state has underfunded pilot for decades, and we need a vocal mayor that will work with our state delegation to make a more robust argument to the state. We see other mayors making this argument. We see them going to the state and testifying. I want to do that as mayor too. Ultimately, this is a civil rights issue. Every underfunded community is also a high minority population community, and that includes Hamden. I grew up middle class. My dad is a public school teacher. My mom works in special education. They taught me that the best investment we can make is the education of our kids, and that we are only as good as how we treat our most vulnerable. I will hold these values as we head into steeper debt payments and managing an influx of federal dollars. With that, thank you all for having me. I'll be reaching out to all of you as this next week, and I hope to have a more one-on-one discussion of our values, and you can get a little more in depth about me and answer any questions that you guys have.
Thank you very much, Peter. We're going to pop you back in the waiting room, but we're going to bring you back out at the end.
Okay, great.
Thanks. All right, and Lauren.
Should be set.
All right, Lauren, this is the final question, and as such, you could work in your closing statement into it. We are not going to interrupt you, or will not interrupt you until the 3.5-minute mark, at which point he'll say 30 seconds. All right, and so
Okay.
Right.
here's your question. And finally, to get you ready for door knocking, how do you explain complex financial issues in layman's terms when talking to Hamden residents?
Okay, so that's actually a pretty important skill to have. One I enjoy, and it really takes a clear understanding of what you're trying to explain. So what you have to do is obviously put it on very relatable terms. So let's use an example. Cost avoidance. So this shows up in the budget frequently. It's in the budget 3 times this year. It's against the recommendation of auditors and financial advisors because it's essentially a subtraction in the expense line from anticipated savings. So if you know that you have to get $100 worth of groceries from the grocery store, and then you have $10 in coupons, those coupons are your cost avoidance, a subtraction from what you have to spend. So I guess it's just important to put those all in very relatable terms and have fun with it. So thank you for spending the night before spring break with me. I really appreciate the care and the thought that people are taking in electing municipal leaders. It's been an absolute pleasure working with this DTC and developing a platform so our shared values are front and center in our leadership. And I would be very honored to have your vote and your support.
All right. Thank you, Lauren. And
Thank you.
let's bring Brad and Peter back out. And if anyone wants to clap or whatever, you can unmute. Kind of a weird Zoom world we're living in. It's not so easy to do it. It always feels awkward over Zoom anyway. But I do want to thank the 3 of you for taking the time to come and speak with us, and for filling out your questionnaires and having these very, very important conversations with each of us. And we look forward to continuing the conversation. So, and thank you for everyone who was watching with us tonight. I was looking also at the Facebook Live, and we had topped out at 30 viewers on there at one point, in addition to having about 30 at the maximum at maximum point in this Zoom tonight. And I think there'll be many more views over the coming weeks as folks have the time to look at this. I hope everyone have a great weekend, and we will see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Night. Thank you.